Hi, and welcome to another episode of Labbing It. In today's video, we are going back to our Veeam environment and we're going to start configuring our backup jobs or some of our backup jobs to use the storage snapshot method. So at the moment, we are performing backups just using the traditional method of what we call hot add, whereby Veeam just snapshots the virtual machine and takes the data straight from the VMware environment and puts it into our data store. We are going to kind of bypass that process, bypass the VMware environment, and actually have our proxy server, which does all the data related processing, to connect directly to our SAN, where our virtual machines live, and perform a snapshot of the volume to which those VMs live, and then perform or extract the VM data straight from the data store itself and move that to our repository. So today we're going to do that on a Windows Server 2016 box. So that's the proxy server that we're going to configure. And then we're going to go into our SAN and give permissions for that proxy server to actually communicate with the data stores on the SAN. And then we're going to configure it all up in Veeam and enable our job for storage snapshot backups. And to provide a little bit more specifics with how our environment is configured, our vSAN is configured with the iSCSI protocol. So our ESXi servers are connected to the vSAN over iSCSI, and that's how the data stores are presented to ESXi and how we build our virtual machines upon that. So our proxy server will need to be able to communicate with the SAN over the exact same network. So we'll be setting up our proxy server with two NICs, one for the production environment, the management environment, and the other one for the iSCSI network. As mentioned, we'll need to set some permissions in the vSAN to allow the proxy server to communicate with the vSAN, and then we will specifically add the HPE vSAN information into our Veeam software. And then when we actually configure the backup proxy in Veeam, which will be this Windows Server 2016 box, we need to set the transport method to either automatic selection or direct storage access. And as already mentioned also, we will need to make sure that the backup job has the storage integration option selected. So let's dive into the lab and get things going. So this is my management PC that I've been using to configure things up. So I'm going to log into our vSAN. Now I've got a couple of videos that I created previously on how to set this up and configure it with VMware. So look back through my videos and you'll find setting up the HPE Storevirtual environment. So I'm just going to log in and we're just going to get a few little details out of here so we understand exactly how we're going to get this proxy server to communicate with the SAN. And while that's happening, I'm also going to open up my browser. I want to log into my vCenter. Getting some warnings about Windows 7. I'm going to update this machine to Windows 11 or Windows 10 box very soon. And here I've got so I've got 3 ESXi hosts with 4 virtual machines. And if we just look at the configuration of one ESXi host and we have a look at the network, and I think if we have a look at VM kernel adapters, you can see here that we've got some connectivity to our vSAN, our iSCSI network. So our production network is on the .10.0/24 network. Our iSCSI network is on the .11.0/24 network. So our proxy server needs to be able to configure, needs to be configured with an interface on this very same network. So I've already kind of pre-configured this box up. So this is Mel Proxy -1. It's on the network, it's on the domain, and it's been given an IP address of 10.19. So in order to connect this box to the SAN as well, we need another interface. So I'm just going to go up and configure the settings of this machine. I'm going to add another network adapter, click finish. And as you can see here, I've got it on the Labbing It Melbourne network segment because this is a Melbourne based machine. Now I don't have any segregation for my iSCSI network at the moment. I will do at some point, but so I use the exact same LAN segment, Labbing It Melbourne, and the reason being, if I look at my actual, I need to configure this. Hang on, I'll click OK, and the virtual machine will just update with this new interface. If I go to my Store Virtual machine and check the properties, here it's the same thing. So this first adapter is actually for the production network, and this second adapter, even though it's on the same LAN segment, is actually on the iSCSI network, on the .11 network. So in here, so this is a 10.19. All I'm going to do is just make this an 11.19 interface. So that's the first interface. Here's the second one now that's just been added in. It has picked up a DHCP address, I suspect, but I'm just going to change all that. And I'm going to add in numlock 192.168.11.19, not 111, 11.19. It's a 24-bit network. I'm not going to put a gateway address, and I'm not going to add any DNS servers. This is purely just for the iSCSI network to configure or to communicate just over the IP addresses. And one of the recommendations as well when you're setting up a server with multiple interfaces is just to ensure that we don't register this connection in DNS. So I always uncheck that box. And done. And the quickest way to verify that we are communicating over the iSCSI network is if I come back to my PC, and if I come back into the Store Virtual Management Console, what I can do here is check my cluster settings, and over here I have the virtual IP address configured for the cluster, which is 11.50. That's the address that I'm going to need to communicate with the proxy server. So if I do a ping to 11.50, we should get a response. And we do. So that tells us now we do have connectivity on the same network using this secondary interface. So what we need to do now, because we're using iSCSI, we do need to set this proxy server up with some iSCSI information. Sorry, I'll start that again. That was probably a bit quick. I just went in here and typed iSCSI, and I'm selecting yes because I want the service to start running. Now, it's asking for the IP address, and this is where I would just do a quick connect. I can put the 192.168.11.50 address, and it should connect, but it won't at this stage because I haven't set the permissions. And the first thing I need to do to set those permissions is in here. I need to get the initiator name, which gets automatically created as soon as we enable the iSCSI service. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to jump back into my Store Virtual Console, and under servers, you'll see that I've already got 3 servers here listed, and these are the ESXi hosts. So they've all been given permission to talk to these 2 data stores that I've got on my vSAN. Again, I've got a video about how I've set all this up, but all we need to do here is just add a new server, and I'm going to call this melproxy1. Same for the description. The controlling server IP address, so that's just the management IP, not the iSCSI. So 10.19. And then I'm just going to put the initiator name, which is what I just copied from the proxy server, and punch that into there. And go, okay, we're not using CHAP. So CHAP is a way that we can secure our iSCSI connections. I'm not using it. So I'll leave that disabled and click OK. And then all I need to do here is right mouse click on Mel Proxy 1 and just go assign and unassigned volumes. And because our VMs could live on either the gold or the silver data store, I am going to give read-write access to each of these data stores. Just bear in mind there's some best practices around this about how you should, for probably each storage device, on how you configure your proxy service to connect to these data stores. So I'm just doing it at a pretty high level just to get the ball rolling, so there's not too much configuration required. But that at a high level, that's exactly all you need to do to set this up. Now, if I jump back into my proxy server, I can come back to targets, and now I can punch in the 192.168.11.50. So that was the virtual IP address of the cluster. So if I just come back here and go to my Melbourne cluster, and we're on iSCSI 11.50. This is the IP address that we use, so the ESXi hosts are using, and so too will the proxy server use to start a connection to these data stores. So back in here, click Quick Connect, and it's automatically seen that there are two data stores here. We've got Mel Gold and Mel Silver. They're currently inactive, so we hit Connect, and then hit here, Connect, and done, and OK. And if I now go and have a look at our disk management, we actually should see two offline disks. Now, you do not need to do anything here. You just leave that as is. That's all Veeam requires in order to utilize this storage snapshot function. So this proxy server now has this visibility. It can actually talk to the vSAN, take a snapshot, and then mount the snapshot onto this proxy server and then do its backup work. There's nothing else you need to do from a configuration perspective. So that's all sorted. Okay, so let's add the proxy server into Veeam. So we go to our Veeam server, which has already been installed and has been running. So I've got previous videos on how I've set all this up. So the first thing to do is we need to add a new server to our infrastructure. Now there are a few ways that we can do this. So we want to add a backup proxy. What I like to do, I like just to be more thorough, and I go down to my managed servers and I go add server. Now this actually doesn't really do anything other than just make Veeam aware that this is a server that could be used for a particular Veeam component. So I'm going to add a Windows server, and the server is called mel-proxy mel-proxy-1.jtairlines.internal, and I'm just going to use the existing administrator account. Now, as you'll notice, my environment is all on the domain. That's not typically considered best practice these days for security purposes. We will change this up at some point, and we'll actually take this environment off the domain. So that's the credentials to access the proxy server. Click next, and it's just going to interrogate the proxy server to see if there are any Veeam components already installed, which it should say no, there is no components. There are no components, and it should want to install. So by default, when we bring a Windows server into the Veeam infrastructure, it's going to install the transport component, and that's okay with me. So we'll say apply, uploading the transport MSI package to the box, and then it's going to deploy it. A little bit of screen tearing happening. There we go. This should only take a couple of seconds. It looks like my got a bit of a screen update issue. It's okay. There we go. It's going to collect some disk information, and happy days. Next, and finished. And now we see mailproxy1 as a backup infrastructure managed server, but it's not really serving any purpose right now. So let's go to our backup proxies. Here we can see we've got mel-VBR, which is the VBR server itself, acting as a proxy server. It's acting as an agent-based proxy server and a VMware-based proxy server. We're going to add another VMware proxy server. So we'll select VMware backup proxy, and now it's telling us which server is going to be the proxy. So now we'll see mel-proxy-1. Now we're going to choose the transport mode. I'm actually going to, normally I'd leave this as automatic selection if this was a production environment and let Veeam handle it. But I really want it to be storage access, direct storage access. And I leave this option ticked in case it can't perform this form of transport. It will fail over to network mode. So I'll click OK. Connected data stores, I leave this as automatic. So when it does have the ability to talk to any data stores in my SAN, I will let it automatically detect. And this proxy is going to be configured to allow for 4 concurrent tasks at once. So basically, when I want to run a backup job, it can actually run 4 tasks, which typically, if we're talking about a virtual machine, that's 4 virtual disks that it will be able to back up at once. So I'm okay with that. I'll leave the transport rules as default because we're not really playing around with transport, and hit apply. So now it's going to probably install an additional component. And hit next. There we go. And okay, all right, that was done. That was quick. I was expecting something else happening there, but that's okay. All good. So now we've got the proxy server in our backup proxies list. Now, the last bit we need to do for configuration of Veeam is add the storage infrastructure. So I'm going to click on add storage. Now we have a myriad of options here. In our case, for this particular setup, we have a HPE Storevirtual setup. So I'm going to choose this option. Then it's going to ask what specifically are we talking about. And I'm going to choose the HPE Storevirtual. And now it's going to ask for the management server DNS name. Now I'm pretty sure I call this mel-VSA1, or is it mel-VSA? That's mel-VSA1. Oops. 10.13. So that's the management IP address of my Storevirtual. So that's this particular workload here. As a matter of fact, if I logged in, did that not work? Hang on, administrator. Hit start. My bad. Log in, and now it'll ask me for username and password. Administrator and my password. Log in. User doesn't exist. Did I spell administrator wrong? It's case sensitive, and I'm pretty sure I do it with a capital A. Okay, and if we go and have a look at our network settings, 10.13, that's the management IP address of this interface. 10.13, and that's the iSCSI interface. So I'll log out now, so I can just confirm that that is the case. I'll come back to my VBR server, and I can use the DNS name here because I have it in DNS. And then it's asking us what type of role does this Storevirtual have. It is block or file storage for VMware vSphere. That is true. It's not block storage for Windows servers. Click next. Now we need to provide some credentials. So that's the same credentials I just plugged in there to log on to the Storevirtual. So I'm going to add it in here. Again, it's case sensitive for HPE. And what I might do, I might just put it in the description, exactly what it is. Store virtual management access. That will do. Next, I do trust. Now it's asking me what protocol are we using. It doesn't give me an option for fiber channel or NFS. It's just iSCSI, which is fine. Backup proxies to use. I'm going to select specifically our new proxy because that is the one that's going to be able to talk to the store virtual, not my VBR server, which is this default proxy. Mount server, that doesn't really matter. That's just for restore purposes. That's all good. Let's hit apply. This shouldn't take too long either. Just double check that this particular server, this VBR server, doesn't have a secondary NIC. I don't think it does. So it's not able to talk to the iSCSI network. Oh, it's got 3 NICs. Maybe it does. Oh, look at that. It is already configured. It's not configured 21.11. That's making me think that this was somewhere last year. I probably was playing around with this to set it up to some nimbles, I reckon. That's okay. We will reuse those later on. All right, let's go back to here and it's complete. And I will run a scan. And that's completed. Beautiful. So if we open up our store virtual now, we can see the cluster, Melbourne cluster, and we can see the 2 data stores, Mel Gold and Mel Silver. Perfect. So let's go back to a backup job. Now I need to use a backup job that is only backing up virtual machines that live on the store virtual. Now, in a real life situation, if you've got virtual machines on a store virtual, for instance, and then you've got virtual machines on some other storage, and you want to do storage from storage snapshots, you can actually mix them into the same backup job, and Veeam will determine which virtual machines can be backed up by the storage snapshot and which is going to be backed up through the traditional means. So I think this one here, immutable backups, which is going to our immutable storage. These are 2 virtual machines that we could use. So let's go into the job. As a matter of fact, I might just click the history and just see how it's been backed up. So it's been using network-based backup. And in VMware's, in Veeam's terms, this is probably the least best used transport type. Ideally, you use either direct storage or hot add. In this case, network, which is kind of the third option when the other 2 are not available. So we should see something different in our backup jobs now when we run it. It won't be by NBD, which is the network-based backup. So let's go into the job settings and make sure it's all configured as we need it to be. So we don't need to change anything here, but we do here. So this is under storage. We're not changing what we are targeting. I am going to change the backup proxy just so that, not this one, just so that we make sure that we're definitely using this proxy server. I'm not going to change any of the other settings. I will go into advanced, and all I'm interested down here is under integration, and this is where we can enable backup from storage snapshots. So I'm going to tick that box. There are some additional options here. We can limit the process VMs count per storage snapshot to a certain amount so that we don't affect our data stores too much. There are some caveats around this kind of setup that you need to probably investigate and see what your storage is capable of managing. So if you do need to limit, this is an option. So it will just process those 10 VMs, for instance, and then once that's complete, it will do another storage snapshot to do the next 10 virtual machines all the way to the end until you've got all your VMs backed up. I'm not going to worry about that option. This option here, we can fail back to a standard backup. So technically, it might fall back to a network-based backup or just a direct SAN-based backup because we do have access to the SAN now. So if we tick this option and the storage snapshot does not work for whatever reason, it will try and fail back to a standard form of backup. Now I'm going to leave that unchecked because I actually want it to do a storage snapshot backup, and if it fails, I want to know why. So I don't want it to fail over, I just want the job to fail, and then I can investigate why the backup didn't work. And this option is only required if you are using a secondary SAN, by which you are replicating storage snapshots from SAN A to SAN B, and you might want to do backups from SAN B, but if that fails, you can revert it back to SAN A. I'm going to go into a bit more details on this in a video that I'm actually going to do pretty soon. So we'll look at that at a later stage. So this is the option I'm going to leave it at. Go OK, and everything else I do not need to touch. And go finish. Now I'm going to run the job, and let's see what happens. So this job is chained to some other jobs. Just going to say no. I don't want to run any other backup jobs. I just want to run this one on its own. Let's see how we go. Now sometimes this doesn't work the first time because there's probably something we might have missed, something small. I'm hoping I haven't because I've done this a few times now. Preparing VMs for storage snapshots. So we wouldn't normally see this without that option being ticked. And I'm pretty sure if we were to jump back into our management console for the SAN, what we might see here are some snapshots pop up. They'll be temporary, just for the backups only. I don't know if I need to refresh. Got an F5. No, oh, here we go. There we go. Now we can see that Veeam has initiated a snapshot on this particular data store. I think this is just Veeam auxiliary, and that's only just going to be temporary. Once the backup is complete, it will delete the snapshot. So if we go back to our VBR server, snapshots are complete. I suspect that maybe both of these virtual machines are on the silver data store. That's why we're not seeing a snapshot of the gold data store, which is okay. And here we can see that it is using proxy1 to retrieve hard disk 1 for this particular virtual machine, and it's using the storage snapshot. So it's not doing NDB, it's doing storage snapshots, which is what we want to do. And these backups looks like they're going to complete quite quickly. There's not much change since the last backup, which occurred last night. And here we can see it's going to unexport storage snapshots and then delete the storage snapshot. So let's go back into here. Snapshot is now disappeared. And looks like the job is complete. Perfect. So we don't see anything additional in here. That's just all as expected. There's nothing additional in the backup list because this is just a standard backup, but we're just using storage snapshots to perform those backups. What I'm going to do in a future video, we're going to set up some NetApp storage and hook that up to our VMware environment, and we're going to set up some snap mirrors and snap vaults so that we could potentially use snapshots as a recovery method in Veeam. So we would see another backup option in here, one called snapshots, to give us another option for recovery. But I wanted to start with this introductory sort of video to storage snapshots on how to configure that. So that's all gone pretty smoothly. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been quite useful for you. Stay tuned. I will be back shortly with another video in the coming days, which we'll, like I said, we'll do some additional storage with NetApp. Use secondary backup snapshots, and we'll see how that all works in with Veeam. So thanks very much, and we will talk again soon.